to End Time Talk Radio, where the truth is usually stranger than fiction. The purpose of these shows are not to scare you, but to prepare you, because what you don't know could hurt you. The word says in Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge." Thank you for joining us. My name is Julie, and here is the host of the show, Barry Meyer.
Today is June 28th of 2016. A lot of things have been happening. I haven't been on the radio a whole lot, but if you go to barry-julie.blogspot.com, you can actually catch up with all the news that I've been seeing and catching. You can also catch up with the guests we're going to have with the Rant when he puts it out. He's actually a former IRS auditor and talks about what's going on in the United States, also the world. Things that you need to be awake to what's happening. Some of the things that I was seeing today that I wanted to kind of point out: S&P cuts United Kingdom credit rating from AA to AAA. Greenspan warns of crisis imminent. He urges a return to the gold standard. How vulnerable is a shaky economy to the BRICS exit fallout and the European bank meltdown? Normally, things have been just, most people have not been paying attention. There is so many things happening. That's the main reason why we're in End Time Talk Radio and have it on the blog, that people can see what's going on. There is so many things that are happening. Michael, thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Michael, I don't know when it was I last talked to you. It might have been last year, but right now with the BRICS exit, there's so many things that are happening right now that if you could put it into maybe one paragraph to warn people, what would you say? Something off the top of your head, what would you say it is so important that you need to follow what's happening?
Really and truly, it's in the stock markets. There's no value in the stock markets until we get back to a gold standard. There's no value in a bank until we get back to a gold standard, and therefore there is no currency that is currently safe in the world for you to point to.
Well, that's what you were talking today. You said in your rant today, all investment is at risk now. Can you kind of maybe give it in layman's term for people?
Well, and again, it's because there is no standard. There's no value. It looks good on paper, but there's no real there. And one of the things that really you have to look at is when earnings drop so far below the price of a stock, for instance, then the stock market is so vastly overvalued. Right now it takes you close to 29 years to get, just on dividends, that's not on the gains, but to get back your capital investment through dividends. Well, the problem is their earnings are falling. Everything that they're basing it on is falling, is going down, and yet the stock market keeps going up.
Well, and when you're talking about that, one thing I did see, they're talking about how even fast foods, and that's their dollar menus, and that stuff is now being hit.
Oh yeah, and again, if you look at it, they keep talking about consumer spending is rising. I disagree. When I look at it, consumer spending is going down because there's less foot traffic in any of these places. Now, they have raised their prices, as you know, 4 to 5% over the last year, but there's still such a decrease in customers' numbers that they're having a tough time making ends meet.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more. I think they said if you're they said something about if you have $10 in your pocket and no debt, you're better off than like 25% of most Americans out there now.
Yes, and actually, if I saw another report, this came from the Commerce Department. If you have a $400 bill, unexpected $400 bill, almost 1/3 of the American households will declare bankruptcy because of that $400 bill.
That's crazy because, where I live, I see a lot of people that have two jobs. They're barely making it. Now, I'll be honest with you, Michael. Where we live, I would almost say that it's a total different state. What I mean by that is there been such a major influx of people here that I would no longer call it the state we're in. I would call it a multitude of states of people that have moved here. And the main reason, well, I could almost say there's three different reasons. The biggest reason I would say would be, they've felt that they're supposed to be here, whether it's God or whatever reasons. Another reason is because economically, it is so much less expensive out this way, and so a lot of people are paying their houses off. And another one is a lot lower is, I have family here.
Yeah, and I think if you look at where they're coming from, they're places where the government has opened the borders, that the government regulation has closed the factory, has closed their former means of making a dollar. And so therefore, they have to move to a place that at least has some semblance, some hope of a job. Did most of them come from cities? Do you know that?
You know what? I would say so. Majority of the people have come from like California. People that have moved in from like up in Michigan. I couldn't tell you distinctly what cities, but they have moved from different cities. It wasn't like.
Areas. They're coming from urban areas or more urban areas to a less urban area. Am I right?
Yes. Well, here's an example. So two people I've met. One worked at Skunk Works and one worked at Lockheed Martin. Both of them they were in Fort Worth, and one was an engineer on the SR-71 spy plane, and he talked about just a little bit of what was it like to living out there. And he says, with all the crimes and different things, he said, I'm so glad to get out. He got out 4 years ago out of Skunk Works. And so I'm seeing a lot of people that are even especially a lot of government people here, military. Even I even met Michael. I have met two people from Department of Defense. And I asked the guy, I says, what did you do there? And he flung me off in a different direction. He says, did the Cardinals win today? And so it's like, don't ask me, I can't tell you type thing. But I'm meeting a lot of people like that now.
Well, but again, what you're describing, and I called it the juggler a few years back. The lifeline for cities is you have to get food into them, and you have to get energy into them. It all has to be imported. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they are on a real tenuous lifeline. The ship is moving away from them, and with the vast number of people they're having to compete with, and the problem is government, with its handout programs where 53% of all Americans are receiving some sort of handout from the government. If you are in private industry, you can't compete with those handouts because they artificially drive the price of everything up. One of the things that I know that you had said that we were going to talk about was housing.
Yes.
The influx of refugees into this area, and I'm along the Front Range in Colorado, Wyoming. That is it's causing a problem. It's causing housing prices to rise, and it's pushing people that have a job, pushing people that are trying to work for a living. It's pushing them out of the market. They can no longer compete. Guys that don't have this problem, they get everything handed to them. They're in great shape because the government's providing for them. Mm-hmm. My daughter happens to work as a supervisor in the local housing authority. And over the last 2 years, they've processed more than 38,000 applicants for housing because the housing in Colorado no longer, the waiting list is 2 years. But if they get on here, and then after 2 months, 3 months, they can transfer because they're already getting it. They go to the front of the line down there and not have to worry about it.
And I can collaborate what you're talking about. I have a family member that's actually a teacher, and I think they're like in a third grade teacher. And they said, they had such a major influx of all the Somalians now move up into Wyoming there, that now You can tell when you're out there like shopping, they're not nice to you. They don't want to learn. They're lazy. When we were leaving Cheyenne, when we moved out of Cheyenne about just over a year ago, we seen all the areas that they were building for the new housing developments that was going to be extremely low income housing.
Right. It's all assisted living. But the problem is Native Americans cannot get into the line because it is totally full of the refugees that they have to take. And I believe that this particular area, and I'm talking the Greeley to Cheyenne area, 50-mile swath, is targeted for about 10,000 of these refugees.
Well, now that's going to pose a problem to, well, let's say churches. I think that we've already heard some stuff that's been going on. Christian churches that, there's, these Muslim people, they don't like how we conduct our churches and that. And they're probably, we could see things happen. Already in Idaho, we already had a 5-year-old get raped by some Muslim migrants up there in Idaho now.
But see, that's not a crime in their religion.
Yeah, well, yeah.
This is one of the problems that I look at is the culture is so different, number one. Number two, they are not asked in any way, shape, or form to assimilate. And if they can't, and I know I sound like a Trump supporter because I am on this particular issue, we've got to close the borders. We got to put a moratorium on anybody crossing the borders until we have a verifiable means of checking where they're at, who they are, and what they're from. And the problem is anybody that is of the Muslim faith, and I know this is going to cause problems, but anybody that is of the Muslim faith should be required to register as an agent of a foreign government because Islam is not just a religion, it is a way of life from government structure like the old Romans used to have all the way through to believing in God. It is a way of life. It is a government doctrine that is followed.
Well, and now the Southern Baptists are telling people in their churches, take these people and house them in your houses. And I'm like, you guys are crazy.
Yes, you are, because, again, you don't know if the one that you have gotten is radicalized. You don't know if the one you have gotten is a sleeper cell. And you really don't know what they're going to do in the future. And here's the problem, is in the Quran, it starts off very benign. I had to do a paper on this when I was in college. And it starts off very benign, but it very quickly turns from a battle between believers and non-believers, between true believers and non-believers. And so what happens is, if you and I do not see God in exactly the same way, we have to be enemies. And by the same token, if my group or if my Ayman calls for a jihad, I have to go to battle or else I am considered a non-believer. I am also putting myself at risk to be executed. And so this is why if we're not over there with our nose in their business, they'd be fighting each other. But as long as there's an infidel in place, then they'll be fighting with them.
What you're saying is, yeah, go ahead.
Situation.
What you're saying, awake is not enough. Watching it happen
Right.
is not enough.
And I talk quite a bit with Steve and Stan Grant on the In Defense of a Nation show. And that's exactly, we had a program a couple weeks ago that was titled that, Awake is Not Enough. Because just because you can see the problem, you still have to take a proactive step against the problem. You just can't let it fester. Because sooner or later, the snake is inside, the seed of the snake is inside that religion, and it is going to come out and it is going to bite you.
Michael, now we have family that's already starting to see this stuff happening. But at one point, when does that snake start biting them? They go like, "Oh my gosh, I need to move" or something like that because it's getting so bad for them.
Well, but this is the thing. I don't know that it's going to just bite the ankle. I think it's going to go for the heart.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so I think the analogy is correct. They're gonna bite, but I think it's going to be too late at the point you let them bite, because they're not going to be going for an ankle. They're not going to be going for a hand. They are going to be going for the heart.
And what's interesting about it is the reason why they're coming in here is because they're getting money for all this. They're following the money.
They're following the money. They're getting paid by their own governments to leave, and then they're getting paid and supported over here. And this is one of the things in the current election I don't think anybody has taken into account, is the individual anger factor. In fact, I've presented a couple of lectures on this, but the anger vote, and this was to Republican clubs, I told them that they're underestimating the anger vote. This is why none of their candidates would be able to win, because they are viewed as much of an enemy as the Democrats, and the Democrats are viewed as much of an enemy as the Muslims, that they are invading their territory.
You know, Michael, I'm seeing now, years ago when we started going to Pastor Steve's church down in Colorado there, I'm really seeing how the Bible is so awake, makes a person really awake to what's happening, because so often so many people are missing what's going on, and all this stuff's happening and not knowing, interpreting of it exactly or correctly puts a person to a sleep state.
Yes, because you're lulled into a false sense of security. It can't happen here, or it's never happened here. And so what do you do is, and this is why the push to take guns was so ill-timed. If they want this, they want the place where only the criminal is armed. And Islam does not recognize, Muslims do not recognize our laws whatsoever. So if they take away our guns, you and I are the guys that are right on the cusp, because we're the ones that have been speaking out, and they're going to come for us first.
Michael, you know, now they had a college out in Arizona, and now it's a private college, but I can see this going into other colleges too, where the students are said, okay, if you're going to come here, $30 your intuition or your tuition is going to pay for illegal aliens, and it's crazy. It's like for them to go to college too. Everything is getting turned upside down. What was right is wrong now.
Right, and we were warned about this by Benjamin Franklin. We've given you a republic if you can hold on to it. Well, what we're looking at is we are giving illegal aliens in, I'll use Colorado, across the state. They have no tuition when they go to college, or at worst, they have in-state tuition. Well, that's not right. I'm sorry. If you're letting a guy from Mexico or Honduras or Guatemala get an education for less than it cost me to get my education 45 years ago. And they're not having to pay for any of that. I had to show that I was in state, that I had a job and all that stuff, that I qualified academically or whatever, and then I still was in trouble. But now they turn around and they just say, okay, we're going to provide the education for you. Where have they supported the tax base? They haven't been here. They're not legal citizens. Why is America always at the back of the line for American entitlements given by our government through our taxpayer dollars?
Well, you know, and you know, the conversations I come across, those who are willing to talk, which is quite a bit. One of the conversations I came across was, there's a lot of people out here that actually are getting ready for the Middle Eastern people for the fight. The fight is coming, and they're getting ready for it.
They're getting ready for the fight. And I agree with that premise. But again, your kids, we've lost 2 generations, almost 3 full generations, since they instituted the Great Society doctrine of political correctness in our schools. And one by one, the values, the principles that I was taught back in the 50s and 60s in school has been eliminated, and that is a real disaster. My grandkids are not getting an education that was anything at all like mine. We had to take civics. We had to know what government was. We had to know how God formed this country. We had to know why our founding fathers may have been deists, as a lot of people have claimed, but they quoted the Bible. They knew the Bible inside out. And the first expenditure that our government made, the first expenditure, formal expenditure that the House of Congress ever passed, was to print Bibles so that the people could have them to read.
Well, when I'm seeing different people, veterans come by, I come up to them and say, thank you for standing for the United States Constitution. I did that to a county deputy, a sheriff, and he says, I never hear that anymore. I never hear people thanking me for standing for the U.S. Constitution. It's a sad state to hear that.
Yes, and but again, it's part and parcel of what they've been taught. All you have to do is look at the way our veterans are being treated by the Veterans Administration.
Mm-hmm.
If they gave the same care and consideration to our veterans as they give to refugees, there would be nobody even know what the VA is all about, because it would be covered. But because they haven't done their job, we get the Wounded Warrior projects that have to be privately funded. Well, you've already paid your taxes for that. That government made them a promise when they signed up for that, and now they're reneging on it. That's wrong.
Let me kind of go back a little bit on the financial. Let me ask you this question. Okay, so the gentleman that runs wolfstreet.com, he's got a question on there. How vulnerable is a shaky U.S. economy to the BRICS exit fallout and the European bank meltdown? How shaky are we?
We're extremely shaky. And again, it's because we've continued to spend. Who can buy? And this is a question I'm just going to throw to you.
Okay.
Who can buy Americans' debt bonds anymore? If the central banks stop printing money so that they can buy them,
mm-hmm.
Who is going to be able to afford that $19 trillion with the economy the way it is? Don't forget, we're saying that the Eurozone is going to go down. We're turning around, and Japan has been in a recession now for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
China is on the rocks. You can't get in there and do an audit, but there is nothing that they're giving us that observers can verify as concrete growth. It's all make-believe growth. We pay a guy to clean off the table. Oh, I'm sorry. You go into a restaurant like McDonald's, we call it a fast food joint,
mm-hmm.
and you take your stuff and dump it in the trash on the way out, you get berated. You can be arrested and fined because you've taken somebody else's job. That's how bad it is. So don't tell me how great their economy is. Nobody has a good economy right now, and the central bankers want it so. That's why they all went off of the gold standard, is so that they are unrestricted in the amount of fiat that they can produce, and they're floating the stock markets, they're floating governments on a sea of liquidity that in reality is not there.
Yeah, well, okay. So with the economy being shaky, like at the beginning of the month, there's a downdetector.com. It actually tells you different websites and different things that are down. Like EBT, there was a lot of things being said that EBT cards weren't working. So what happens? Right. Okay, so now we're seeing some different riots, especially around Donald Trump and different things like that. At what point do we start seeing some major riots start happening? Do we see it next month? Do we see it in August?
I think you're already. We just saw one in Sacramento.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Okay, now here's the problem. The Sacramento gave or allowed the skinheads, the neo-Nazis, to purchase a public meeting permit. Okay? Protesters then of the group showed up. The cops should have run every single one of those protesters into the pokey. I'm sorry. If any protester got wounded or any protester got killed, they should have just left them sitting there. The neo-Nazis are the only ones that had a legal right to be in there. They should have been protected by the police because they paid for their permit to meet. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sorry, in the Constitution, in the amendment, the Bill of Rights, you have a right to peaceful assembly. Great, the government said we're going to make $1 on it. Okay, I can live with that. But then the guys that showed up to protest them, they had no right to be there. Mm-hmm. They had no right to be there. They should have been put in jail. They're wounded, they're injured, they're dead, should have just been left to rot in the streets. It's not Christian, I know, to say those things, but legally, that was the case.
Well, there's going to be a lot of things that won't be Christian here soon, like fighting for your family and having to protect your own very life here soon.
Well, and like I have told other people, my life, if my son, my daughter, my grandkids, if their lives are threatened, I'm old. I'm expendable. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to go down without a fight. They can have my gun one bullet at a time until I can no longer pull the trigger or I run out of ammunition.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now, like I say, it doesn't sound very peaceful, but that's the way the cow ate the cabbage.
Well, if you don't think that way, then what happens is you end up becoming the cat that gets skinned. His very life himself is exterminated for doing nothing.
Right. Well, at least, and like I've told them, I'm not built to stand in the gap, as the Bible puts it. I'm not built to stand there very long, but I will stand as long as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. You probably might follow this website, Zero Hedge. They had a thing on there where Bank of America said, if you're going to panic early.
Oh, optimism is what set this market up for a really crushing blow after the British election. Mm-hmm. Now, I've got one. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's nobody has considered the negative rates that mm-hmm. the central banks around the globe are implementing. Here's the problem that they are running into, and they're trying to find a way because they did not put a provision for that in America until 5 years ago when negative rates first came up. Mm-hmm. But if you get a house loan, if you have a house loan that's more than 20 years old, more than 10 years old, if you still have that house loan that's more than 10 years old and are paying on it, and if the bank has lent you the money, has given you the money, you don't owe them as much interest as they owe you. Mm-hmm. And the banks are really up in arms about this because it was something that they had not contemplated here in the States. And the negative rate bomb that's about to go off is brutal. But if you put money in the bank, they take it out because you've given them your money. Well, then on the other side of the coin, if they've given you a loan for a business, if they've given you a loan for a car, if they've given you money for a loan on a house, guess what? That money they have given you, they owe you interest on it when they go to a negative rate.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's...
Yeah, and the bankers are up in arms about it. But I'm sorry, negative rates are a thing here. Governments have gone to negative rates. What's fair for one is fair for the other, but they never saw it that way.
All right, so let me jump to this one. So Venezuela's shrinking economy. I mean, everything. I mean, we don't even hear about news on it unless you really look for it. Do you see what's happening in Venezuela coming to America? How they're trying to basically they're fighting for food, even having to kill the animals around there.
Yeah, they're killing everything, and like the guy said, a roll of toilet paper only costs a nickel. The problem was the people don't have the nickel, and number two, the store didn't have the toilet paper, so there was no trade.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that's really slowing down in America is the velocity. And when I say the velocity, that's the number of times, how quickly a dollar transaction will turn over in the economy. Our velocity has slowed by probably 38% in just the last year.
That's quite a bit then, actually.
Yeah, and that's why so many businesses are in trouble. If you look away from Wall Street, if you look away from Washington, D.C. and the area around it, tell me an area of the country that is really doing well financially.
I really couldn't tell you. You hear about Dallas, Texas, but that's not doing well because all the oil, the big boom or the bust they had.
Yeah, the bust is there. Yeah, and and this is the problem. In those areas, Wall Street makes money on people who want to invest, have to invest. Wall Street does this, okay? All the laws that were written in 2009, 2010 to get Wall Street, the bailout programs, all that was done, they put it under the name of the Consumer Protection Act.
Mm-hmm.
But what actually happened is it protected Wall Street. This is why Wall Street has rebounded so well.
Okay.
So, and this is why I keep saying that when they do these polls, when they do the surveys on the presidential election and stuff around here, they don't get to the people. First of all, they only talk to those that voted in the last election, not those that have come on board. This is the same problem that we saw in the primaries when Trump got record numbers until all of a sudden they said, like in our state here in Wyoming, oh, you had to be registered in August before you could participate in the state caucus in this April. Well, Trump wasn't in the race, or I wasn't excited about the race. Too bad, so sad, you lost your chance. Yeah. And the states let him get away with it because it's the political parties that are running the primary season, not the states. The only thing the states really paid for was the ballots come the state primary election, and then, of course, for the state general election.
Okay, so mentioning about Trump, what are you seeing? If we have an election, I'm wondering if we're even going to have one. But if we do, who do you think will be president?
Right now, your guess is as good as mine. If I follow what my heart tells me, I would say that we are in the same position as the bookies in London were. They were only talking to the people that had a vested interest in the deal. They were talking to the big money people. That would lead you to Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. But if they turn around and talk to the anger voter, the Tea Party guy, the guy that has been disenfranchised and has sat on the sideline for years, this is the first election that I can recall since possibly Dwight Eisenhower was alive that people are climbing back into the ranks of the voters, that the percentage of registered voters is actually climbing right now. This is why Trump set a record for primary votes, and I don't think anybody has read that correctly yet.
Okay, so let's say Trump gets in. He's really basically saying we need to become more a self-sufficient country, basically. I mean, we can add different words.
If he gets elected, he will never take office. Mm-hmm. He may talk in the 2 months leading up to that inauguration, but he'll never take office. Either an outright political enemy within the United States, a self-bred person from inside the United States that doesn't want all the changes, that's going to ruin their lifestyle, will take him out, or it'll be the other side is that the establishment will take him out. One of the things that was in the news today was Benghazi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And you and I have talked in the past about Benghazi quite a bit. And what I found so extremely interesting in Benghazi, and this is why I'm saying it's inside the government, is they have never yet asked the right question. The guy that they have arrested was a former employee, or was a current employee at that time, of the CIA. Mm-hmm. He was arrested, this Libyan national was arrested for leading this assault. But the problem is, the guys that were inside, Stevens and Smith. Smith was dead by the time the CIA guys got there 25 minutes after the fire was set. He was dead, but they have never told us how. Ambassador Stevens was not drugged through the streets as popular fiction would have you believe, mm-hmm. but was taken to the hospital by the looters. He arrived in the hospital at 12:45 in the morning of the 12th, September 12th. By 1:30, he was pronounced dead, but he was pronounced dead as a John Doe. It wasn't until 4 o'clock in the morning when when the CIA people that were besieged at the Capitol, at the warehouse there, the CIA warehouse, got hold of the Libyan guards at the Benghazi Medical Center, that they were able to make a positive ID. Nobody knew who the guy was. So how did they get all the photos, alleged photos of him being drugged through the streets and cattle prodded and all this stuff? He may have been on the way, but he was totally unresponsive when he got to the hospital, and he got to the hospital before Doherty and Woods, the two ex-Navy SEALs, were killed on top of the warehouse. They were still in Tripoli at the time. They hadn't yet got to Benghazi when when Ambassador Stevens was pronounced dead in the Benghazi Medical Center. Explain this to me. They put out a movie called 13 Hours. The thing started at 9:40 at night. Everybody agrees to that. And yet by 8 o'clock in the morning, all the survivors, both planes, with the dead and the survivors, were already back in Germany. How did they get 13 hours when the thing started at 9:40 at night and was over by 8 o'clock the next morning?
It doesn't add up to 13 hours, does it?
Yeah, 13 hours just doesn't show up. This is what I'm saying. The whole narrative, even yet, is false. And the reason it's false is because I believe it was a government-sponsored job by the U.S. government to get a alleged hacker that NASA had identified, and that was Mr. Sean Smith, the information officer that was killed, and he was online when the thing started. And I think they got him because they thought he was hacking into their system when he was there to repair it.
Well, I know, and that keeps getting brought up. And Hillary said today, "Can't we just get on with other things?" She said something about, well, I'm really sad that 4 Americans lost their life, but can we just move on?
But again, it wasn't the 4 Americans lost their life. It was how they lost their life. It was total indifference. I think the first 2 people that lost their life because of American government. The American government directly took their lives. I want to talk to Craig Stevens, Ambassador Stevens, personal security officer. If I was Trey Gowdy, that is the guy I would have indicted. That was the guy that I would have on my talking list. I need to ask him questions. What did he see? How did he do it? Because he was the only guy inside the consulate when it was attacked that was armed. He's the only guy that's left alive. Explain that to me, Alice. It doesn't make any sense.
But we're never told that in the news, though.
That's what I'm saying. This is why I say it's a cover-up. They know what they're going to do. They know how they're going to say it, so they present it with a spin on it that isn't giving us the actual fact. If they're willing to say on the financial circuit that Britain's central bank is in trouble, that the banks of the world, because of their involvement in Britain, the international trade bit, if they're in trouble, if they're willing to admit that, how bad is the real situation if you cut away all the glitz and get down to brass tacks?
Well, that's what they talk about in Venezuela. They said, oh, everything's fine, it's fine. And all of a sudden, the day it happened, they said, oh no, everything's bad.
Right.
But everyone believed them up to the very moment.
Because that was the official line, and we're not going to question anybody's government. We're not going to do this. This is why I applaud the Brits so much, is they took their country back. It's going to be painful. There's going to be very, very tough. But at least they took the step to stand up and be counted and not go along with the globalist movement in the world.
Will they do another vote on that?
I don't think they will. I keep hearing that, and right now, who's to say what they will and will not do, governments of the world? But I don't think they will. I think what may be more likely to happen is that you have a vote in Italy or you have a vote in France before Britain could even think about having a revote, that they're going to have a vote in one of those two places, and they're going to vote to leave the Euro Union as well.
But how could they when their banks are so bad?
Well, this is one of the cute little things that you have to look at. Name me a solid bank that, okay, and I know that this is going to sound tough. Name a solid bank, because I know that there is no bank that is solid in the United States. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So now then, using that as a basis, and the reason I can say this is because of the way that they are in trouble. With their loans, the way that they're in trouble because of business, if the liquidity, if the stuff coming from the federal government does not, from the Federal Reserve, does not continue to flow in, these banks are toast. Mm-hmm. The banking system here is toast, and this is why I say that there is no safe investment. Oh, invest here, invest there, invest in this, invest in that. Why? In what? On what basis? The consumer is worse off right now. He's actually getting less real income right now today than they were in 1976, 40 years ago. 40 years ago. I didn't put that out. This was Dr. Weiss, who has his own consulting firm, his own hedge fund firm. He's the one that put it out. And I'm sorry, if he's willing to say something like that, if he's willing to put something like that on paper, I'm going, boy, this leaves us in a world of hurt.
With all these things that are happening, now we have another thing that the American people are not seeing. We're seeing the escalation with Russia, because now I just seen today, U.S. destroyer committed gross violation in encounter with Russian ship. Well,
again, on whose basis? If we weren't trying to be the policeman for the world, we wouldn't be in these situations. Mm-hmm. Look at how much we're wasting. As much as they're wasting on the military, then you have the guys that did the sit-in last week assaulting Trey Gowdy and his committee for spending $7 million of American taxpayer dollars fruitlessly on this Benghazi investigation. And I'm going, wait a minute, we lose $3 billion a day in overspending. $7 million wouldn't even make a ripple on the pond.
But they're trying to make that look like the big thing, not the other things.
And then the fact that they didn't get their gun control and stuff. Well, great. If you want to put in gun control, call for a constitutional session. Put the states into a constitutional session and have them vote on it, because you have to repeal that amendment. You can't alter it. I don't care how often you stack the Supreme Court. I don't care how often you get a judge to side with you. The problem is, it's there in black and white. You have the right to bear arms. And there is no qualification on that. Now, they can try to put qualifications on it, but I think if we actually had a vote of the citizens, I think we'd find out that most of them are in favor of keeping that amendment as it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so when we're talking about that, according to the 7th Circuit Judge today, Richard Posner, I believe his name was, now he's saying the U.S. Constitution is outdated, and judges should stop studying it.
Excuse me. What has Obama said? Mm-hmm. It's an old document, and it needs to be changed. He said that before he ever took office. There's no change. The only thing is now the guy at the top has put in people that They feel emboldened to go ahead and do this. They're no longer judging it on the merits of the laws that exist. I had an attorney way back when I was in high school and was thinking about going into law. I had an attorney, and he told me, no. He said, it is the law. And I told him this is how I would do something, and he goes, no. The law says you have to do this. And I said, yeah, but, and he said, there's no but. He said, you can work to change that law, yes. But until you get the change through, that is the law, and that's the way it has to be imposed. Well, Mr. Lorenz died back in the early 1970s. He would be appalled at the way things are being done today because they're making up laws from the bench as they go along. They're not enforcing the laws of the land.
They're basically policies.
Yes. They're policy makers.
And they don't trump law. Law trumps policies.
Right. And they're not ruling that way, which is a travesty.
Which makes it really bad because now the American people say, well, it's a law. They don't question anything. They just say, well, they just told me that, so now we go this way.
Yes, and my problem is when you look at that, there is no real basis, and this is where the anger, it's not in the financial sector as much as it's in the legal sector. The anger gets built up inside of the common voter, the Main Street guy. It builds up in him because he knows he's worked for 40 years and is no better off. Mm-hmm. No better off than he was 40 years ago when he started working. He's going, what did I do? And then he sees a government that picks and chooses which laws it is going to obey, which laws it's going to enforce. You don't believe me? Look at Colorado. They put in a legalized pot system, legalized marijuana. That is against federal law. What did the Obama administration do? Nothing. They let it go. Arizona wrote a law that wasn't as tough on illegal immigration as what the federal law states. Mm-hmm. They came down on Arizona like stink on garbage because they don't want that law to be enforced. Mm-hmm. Okay, if they can pick and choose the laws, then I have a right to pick and choose the laws that I'm going to obey. If I want to walk down Main Street with a gun and decide I'm going to shoot somebody because he spit on my car or he gave me some offense, then I should have that right now because our government, and again, this is the rule of law has been broken down. And because the rule of law has been broken down, everything that government does until they go back and adhere to the rule of law is only going to exacerbate the problem. They cannot enforce just the laws that they want. They cannot make a policy to alter those laws that they don't like. They have to follow the law and then go from there. They're not doing it. And therefore, Americans are getting corked off. I talk to them every day.
At what point do they say, okay, the pitchforks come out?
I think the pitchforks are coming out. Mm-hmm. Like I say, I just, some of these lesser-known groups in America, and the neo-Nazi attack out there at Sacramento, I think that was the start because they were legal. They were the ones, and yet everybody's making them out that they attacked. They had a right to be there. Those other people did not have a right to be there. The difference, they had gone through the government and gotten a permit. Well, too bad, so sad. You may disagree with them. You may not support them, which I don't. Mm-hmm. But they had the right because they had taken the proper steps to get there. The protesters of the neo-Nazis had no right to be there at all. And they should have had no public assistance given to them any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
because they were in the wrong.
You know, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but in an hour you only have so much time, so I'm jumping back and forth. Pastor Steve had talked about when he had mentioned, I'll put a link to the video where he was talking about meeting this Russian man from Germany about Deutsche Bank. What are you hearing about Deutsche Bank beyond what he had talked about, where it doesn't have much more time left?
Well, again, the Deutsche Bank is in real trouble. It's one of the banks. It's one of the banks that this Weiss, who did his own analysis, has been doing it on the strength of individual banks around the globe. He's been doing it for 45 years. He gave them a D+ rating just this week. Came out with a D+ rating for them.
And who was that again?
His name is Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. He's got a PhD in economics.
Okay.
And he is, let me see if I got his, Martin Weiss is his name.
Martin Weiss, okay.
And he is really, he really does an excellent job of putting out stuff that he researches. The problem is, again, like everybody else, he gets paid to promote certain investments. So as long as he's not in promoting an investment or discouraging an investment, I'll take what he gives as fact. But in this particular case, he said that most of the major banks in the Eurozone are in dire trouble, that he gives them at best a C+ is the highest rated one I think he said he had. But the problem is most of them failed the acid test, and this is kind of like our own Federal Reserve. I don't know, in March, they changed, they raised the standards for our banks, our local banks, American banks, had to have more, a larger percentage of cash reserve against the loans that they had outstanding. And then they did the stress test, and a year ago, every major bank failed that stress test. They increased the standards that they had to meet, and this time they all passed with flying colors. How that's possible unless the bank itself, the government itself behind the scenes, took measures to make sure that those banks had enough cash on hand to pass that stress test. If they failed it a year ago at a lower standard, and now the standard was raised 8, 10, 12% because of impending loan defaults, and I'm sitting there going, then how did they all pass this time? That makes no sense whatsoever. There's something that's going on, something that they didn't tell us. They changed the parameters somewhere in order for those people to pass those tests.
There's people out there listening right now that have large and also have small amounts of money in the bank. What would your words to them be? Okay, of twofold. Number one, how will they see when the avalanche happens to their bank, and what should they do ahead of time? Do they pull their money out? What should they do?
Okay, and again, my advice on that has been consistent for the last 3-4 years, is to get your money out of the banks, because there is no there. It's a magician's game going on right now, and when you get it out, and everybody asks me that, I say, well, where do I put it? How do I do it? You've got to make sure that when the ship goes off the edge of the cliff, that you have enough to survive until there's going to be a hard landing, but you've got to have enough to survive, food-wise, water-wise, shelter-wise, energy-wise, to that point. And then the second thing you got to do is you've got to have enough guns and bullets, particularly bullets, to protect that. Because that is going to be it's going to go back to the basics. People are going to be seeking food, they're going to be seeking shelter, they're going to be seeking energy, because those are the three things man needs to live, and they're going to go wherever they think they can find it. Most people won't get out of the cities. The cities are the death traps, but the problem is those ones that do get out are going to have nothing, but they're going to have their street smarts, and they're going to be coming for the guy that lives out in the farming, the rural area, and feels that he is relatively safe.
So really, the guys that live out in the farming areas are going to have to kind of get together to protect their own.
Right. I've got another one for you. Have you got, and I'll use my wife as an example,
Mm-hmm.
She has a pension plan that's been, she's worked at the college here for 45 years, and she's got a pretty hefty pension plan built up. They're not going to be able to pay it. Mm-hmm. And part of the problem is over those 45 years, other people have retired and have drawn on the accounts because it's all lumped together. Yes, you have a piece of paper that says you have this much in it, but there's not enough in it. New York State has a $178 billion shortfall in its public pension plan. CalPERS in California has a shortfall in its billions of dollars shortfall in its public employee plan. So when you look at these things and you okay, if the banks close down, or if the just like here over the last couple of days since the British vote, where the market is down 600 points, you've taken a hit. Guess what? You may have been putting that quote unquote into this plan, but the people that are running the plan to get the return that they need have been investing it, and they've not been investing it in nice things, nice safe things. They have been throwing it into high risk yield to get that higher return. But the problem is those are going to be the things that collapse first. So what you're looking at for a retirement plan, because of the Great Recession, if you're approaching 65, you're actually less well off than you were 20 years ago, 20 years before the Great Recession started. You're actually less well off than you were 20 years ago, and prices have gone up since then. The day-to-day price of things has gone up, and they're going to go higher. As you stated in Venezuela, they're killing each other just to get at the family cat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, so again, Venezuela is not. They talk about going socialist, and all socialist is this, and socialism has never worked. It works for a few, but it never works for the whole. Mm-hmm. And if you take a misery index, there was a guy that had a PhD. He was from the University of Chicago. He had a PhD, and he traveled the globe. He had a PhD in socialist government. Mm-hmm. He traveled the globe for the first time. Started in February. He got back about 3 weeks ago, and he's appalled. He thought he was going to find utopias in different parts of the world where communism, socialism had really worked well. Guess what? Guess who the shining example for the world still is, as bad as things are? America.
Yeah.
America is still, he couldn't find anything. Every place he went, he found misery and stagnation that was worse than it was in America. And this is the thing that we have not yet come to grips with. I think I told you the story once. I was doing mineral audits, and I was traveling with a guy from Australia. We were going around the country. We were he was trying to see all the different ways America was attacking the energy problem at that time. And we got up to the Black Thunder mine. It's an open pit coal mine in Gillette, Wyoming. And we got there for the afternoon shoot. We saw the dynamite go off, and the plant manager was explaining to us how they took off 120 feet of overburden at the time to get at a seam of coal that was about 110 foot thick. And then they took off another 35 to 50 feet of overburden to get at a richer seam of coal, better burning coal, had more BTU in it, that was 30 to 35 foot thick. And this old engineer walked away, and he just stood by the car for about 10 minutes. Finally, he came back over, and the tears were still rolling down his cheeks. And he said, that's when he explained to me that in Australia at that time, they were going down 2.5 miles underground to get at a 6-inch seam of coal. Here we were taking off a few hundred feet of overburden to get at a seam of coal that was almost a 1-for-1 trade. It was so thick. And he said something that changed my life. He said, America is truly the land God blessed, when he explained. And think about that for a minute. I had never thought of it in those terms. We take riches for granted that other people can only dream about.
Mm-hmm. And that's,
yeah, go ahead.
And that's where America in the Bible and Defense of a Nation talks about that. We're the one nation in the whole world that's been doubly blessed above any and all.
Right. And the unwalled, we're the only place in the world that has never had walled cities.
Mm-hmm.
Every place else, they built their forts and put the cities inside the forts. And that's where the people went in time of trouble. Not in America. We didn't really do that. We have not had walled cities. We may have had a blockhouse or two out in the in the 1700s in Kentucky and Tennessee, but we didn't have walled cities. And that is hard to understand any place else in the world that you go. Today they're open, I understand. Like, you look at the Kremlin and it's inside the city. The city is growing around it. You don't realize that was the old fort. But it is there. We're the only place that didn't have that. And boy, when you look at the mentality, this is a place that God has blessed. We can grow our own food. How many other countries can grow enough food to feed their population?
Not many.
Not many. We have energy to spare. In addition, how many can do that? How many can say that?
Not
and
many.
We have fresh water in abundance. You put those three factors together, and it does make America truly unique. But then added to it is we have a form of government that they have never had anyplace else. I don't think we have the same government that was put into place. It's no longer a government by the people, for the people, and of the people. It's a government by the rich, for the rich, and of the rich.
Very true. Very true, Michael.
So, yeah, and so again, Barry, when you take everything into account, when you put it all together, financially, morally, we are bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what you have in your bank account. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does.
And it's sad, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Like I say, so, and this is the problem. And I saw a guy that wrote, he wrote a very interesting article about what happens when currency as we know it goes away. And I really want to know, because everybody measures what they have in terms of the currency of choice. But if it no longer exists, how are you going to say that I'm a wealthy man or I'm a poor man if the currency is no longer there, or no longer has any value as we know it?
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to what God had said in the Bible, that your silver will rust, your gold will corrode. Mine does not.
Oh, so true. Yeah. And we're seeing it happen now.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I think we're at that time. And as bad as things are, we still don't have enough people that are actually praying to God, that are actually seeking the face of God for relief. Because it says in Amos that you're going to have to wail. You're going to have to wail for relief before I will walk this way again.
And I understand that people may not understand what we're talking about, but I would definitely encourage people. This is what's changed my life, was in Defense of a Nation and America in the Bible. Two books that changed our life and had us look at Christianity in a way that we've never seen before.
Sure. And I would say to read America in the Bible first, because that gives you the background, and In Defense of a Nation then tells you why America needs to be defended.
And that's why we're seeing the things were happening, but people are missing the cues of what the Bible's saying that's actually happening now.
Right. And that's why, like I say, when we go and do things, Barry, when you ask me these questions, this is why I'm having a tough time keeping saying that the dollar is king. I really am having a tough time doing that, because they have degraded it. What's the value of a dollar? How do you make that anymore when you can't tie it to anything that is solid, is pretty well. Ever since they opened it up and said, okay, we're going to let the marketplace decide how much gold, an ounce of gold is worth, and then we're going to peg our dollar to that. Well, the higher it got, the more that they could print. And then it got to the point, well, wait a minute, we don't even have to worry about how much gold we have. We're just going to print dollars regardless. All they're doing is printing paper. It doesn't mean anything. This is why the economy is still floundering. They haven't, there's no basis, there's no validity in it from God. And Jesus, when he looked at it, he says, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, because it had the image of Caesar on it. Render unto God what is God's. And I think we have totally spaced that part of it out. We got so embroiled that we could handle the great society that we have made America small, not great. But when you go to other countries, as this professor did, you find out, as bad as things are here now, we're still that much better, that much farther ahead of anybody else.
Well, Michael, I don't want to keep you, but I appreciate you spending just over an hour with us now.
Hey, like I say, you get me wound up.
We'll have to do this again sooner than later. Michael, give the Rant information out that people can get your bi-weekly newsletter. Sure.
All they have to do is write. Email address is mccrant@gmail.com. And I don't try to sell them anything. I don't try to do anything except give them information on the status of the political and economic realm.
Michael, any final thoughts?
I think you can determine how far America has slid by the decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court. The political class is twisting itself into knots to support a policy that is insupportable by most people. And because of that, then you judge the whole of our government by that.